Dobrý den, já bych vás chtěl tady přivítat. Já se jmenuji Adamem Vačkář a jsem výtvarný umělec a tady jsem poprosil vlastně čtyři další osoby, aby se zúčastnili tady té vlastně konference, nebo jak bych to řekl, prezentace, diskuze. And I will now switch to English, because this whole conference will be held in English, so please be welcome. I would like to welcome other guests who are here with me. Tereza Stehlíková, who is Czech-British artist and researcher. She's also organizing a magazine, and she's working on her book, and she's going to tell us about her recent research, which is about sensing. And then there is Thorolf van Walsum, who's a Canadian biologist and semiotician, and he is going to present his research about pink salmon as invasive species, but its new ecological roles. Then we have Michal Mitro, who is from Slovakia, but he lives in Brno again. Now he came especially for this event, and he is going to talk about his work in ecology and how he connects art to different locations, how he does research about spaces, and how he deals with this subject. And I asked my good friend Jindřich Brychta, who is researcher in biology at the Charles University. He's assistant professor, and his expertise is chromatics. And since we organized together a platform called Transparent Eyeball, and we engage in different lectures and exhibitions, so I thought he is the closest person from a different expertise than art, who is in biology, to moderate this whole discussion. And I'm also doing a presentation, and this is all in context of my exhibition, which is at NOD, a space in Dlouhá, in the center of Prague, where I would like to invite you afterwards for a presentation, I mean the guided tour, because the show is ending this week. I've been researching about giant hogweed, which is an invasive plant that brought me to this theme of overcoming binaries, what is good and bad, and how we deal with nature, but also all sorts of other things as well. So this whole conference is about this. It's about new ecological roles, about overcoming binaries through different eyes of different people, how we relate to these themes, how we relate to non-human entities through art, biology, research. So I would like to ask Indra if he could say a few words and introduce first speaker.
Okay, thank you very much, Adam. Hello, everybody. Good evening. It's great to see such huge number of participants into today's event. First, some technical remarks. So you know that the whole conference is recorded, and that means also the questions after the talks will be using microphone, and it will be recorded. I hope you are fine with it, and there will be lots of questions. Actually, we have 15 minutes per talk, and there will be 5 minutes per discussion after. And then after the 3 talks, there will be a small panel discussion, also 15-20 minutes, depending on interest. And yeah, so Adam actually made it hard for me to begin with, because he said basically everything I had prepared, and but I would like to say something more about the Transparent Eyeball, and actually the reason why we met together here. Transparent Eyeball is trying to overcome barriers that have been built during time between arts and science. The reason is that when we were discussing with Adam our problems, we realized that the problems are common, only the method or the framework that we are working with is a little bit different, and that we would like to intersect, transect, and that's also why we are organizing these kind of symposia, to make it possible. And today we will be talking about invasive species, but not only. We will also try to understand what the non-human beings are and how they sense the world and how we can build relationships with them. And first speaker will be Thorolf van Walsum. As Adam said, he's a Canadian originally, but he studied in Estonia and now he's doing his postgraduate studies here in Prague at Department of History and Philosophy of Science. And Thor will tell us something about invasion of pink salmon and its consequences or maybe reasons why it happened through the Umwelt degradation. So Thor, if you can use this microphone, please speak close to it and the word is yours.
Okay, yeah, so thank you, Adam and Indra, for having me here today to talk about my ongoing PhD research, which is regarding pink salmon, a species native to the Pacific that was recently introduced into the Atlantic, and it's become quite a problem. So we'll see how we're relating to it and how this problem came to be, as well as my particular approach of explaining how this problem came to be, which I think is generally I think it's a phenomenon of quite general interest. So before we get into any of this, I just want to introduce myself really quickly. My name is Thorolf van Walsum. I'm going into my second year as a PhD candidate at Charles University Theoretical and Evolutionary Biology Department. And as Yindra mentioned, I have an MA in biosemiotics. And of course, a lot of people ask me when I tell them I'm studying theoretical biology, how can biology be theoretical? And well, in the same way that there are blind spots in every area of research, theoretical biology tries to investigate and address those blind spots. So invasive ecologies is a pretty new area, and I'm approaching it from a sort of relational systems perspective, which you'll get to see a little more of as we go through this. So, let's start with my research. This is a town in Finland known as Utsjoki. It's right at the border up here with Norway, and the river running through it is the Tino River, according to the Finnish, and the Norwegians call it the Tana. Culturally, it's a very significant location for indigenous Atlantic salmon fishing. You can see a couple of happy Finns here with their Atlantic salmon, and you can see a very happy Finn over there with the 2014 largest catch of the decade of Atlantic salmon. So that's the location, but we're actually not, I wasn't studying indigenous Atlantic salmon. I was studying Oncorhynchus gorbusha, or pink salmon, which is, well, let's give you a quick introduction to it. Now, this is a joke which I used at a conference earlier this week, and they loved it, so I'll see if it translates across cultural barriers. I needed to find a way of really boiling down pink salmon to their most physicalistic, impressionistic, reductive, determinist, commercialized aspects of themselves, so for the purpose of the presentation. So I went out and I found them on Tinder, and no? Okay. So briefly, they're the most recent... Thank you. They're the most recently evolved of all salmonid. They're native to the Pacific, and they follow a strict 2-year life cycle. They also have a streamlined morphology, which is quite relevant because most salmonids have very complex, diverse ecophysiologies, which develop in complex co-creation with their environment. Lots of different ways that they can go, but these guys are one body shape, essentially, and they always live 2 years. It's also worth noting that they have a powerful cardiovascular system, an extreme tolerance for salinity and temperature, and they can even lay eggs in brackish water, which no other salmon can do, which is to say that they're a generalist. Now, in the 1960s through the 1980s, this streamlined physiology and generalism sympathized with Soviet economic interest. They wanted to make the White Sea a more productive place to fish, so through this couple of decades, millions of fertilized eggs were stocked from the White Sea, from the Pacific Ocean into the White Sea. and around 1980 a self-sustaining population established. Now you can look at the numbers of these pink salmon that show up in the Tino River through the decades. You can see right at the end of the 1970s when the stocking program stopped, they sort of lull and stabilize. There's a few fish showing up in the river here and there, but it seems like they're in a slow decline going into the 2010s, when in 2017, all of a sudden, boom, out of nowhere, a huge jump forward in numbers. And of course, this was very worrying for the Finns and Norwegians then. Since then, there's been a 32 times increase of the number of pink salmon in the region from 2017 to 2023, and it's not really showing any signs of stopping. So it's worth asking why. That leads us to my research. This is the title, the working title of a paper which should be published later this fall or early 2026, depending on how the review process goes. It's titled Degeneracy as the Primary Cause of Rapid Expansion of Pink Salmon in the North Atlantic Waters. And the basic premise of it is the pink salmon lost their ability to home. It was because of a degeneracy in the homing agency that they became lost and dispersed. Now, to visualize this, of course, as with any salmon population, you have sort of a natal environment, and you go out into the ocean, you feed, and you return. But if you were to weaken the process of that return and have a small group even that went off and successfully colonized a new environment, then you would have a rapidly accelerating situation where the whole pink salmon population kind of delocalizes and spreads and colonizes new environments. So, you can see this in the maps of where pink salmon were found across the years. Up to 2012 in Norway, there were virtually none of them. In 2015, they had just a couple here and there in the north. And all of a sudden, 2017, bang. Right. And now this is from 2024, I believe. The map is spreading across southern Norway, Iceland, United Kingdom, Ireland, even hitting some spots in North America. So we really don't know how far this is going to go, but we can talk about, for now, why it happened and what it means and all that. So my hypothesis is the degeneracy hypothesis, and just to lay it out flat, all salmon are highly interspecifically competitive, and therefore, especially in a context like this with uncolonized territory around them, the primary determinant of fitness is population density. And furthermore, the primary constraint on that population density is the practice of homing. So across a fairly short evolutionary timescale, the degradation of the homing happens. The habitat specification ability of the pink salmon goes the way of the mammoth, and all of a sudden the population delocalizes and spreads. So the work that I was doing up in Utsjoki, it was sort of an interdisciplinary thing. I was talking with local fishermen and indigenous folks. And their reports are part of what helped formulate this idea. A lot of them reported the pink salmon behaving strangely. They'd seen pink salmon before, but these were, something was just off about them. Especially them being aimless or erratic, swimming one way and then another, which was very strange, especially for salmon, which are very kind of goal-oriented species. They were also more aggressive than previously seen. There were a couple of fishers with stories of the pink salmon coming up to their boots and, like a rabid dog, attacking them. Pretty crazy. And then also scientists kind of, they repeated this information back. That pink salmon were also on cameras seen swimming back and forth upstream and downstream, which again is very strange for salmon to do, because salmon have places to be. We're doing some hard science here, so I'll just go a couple of the other proofs. In 2015, it was shown that there was a pretty significant drop in allelic diversity and gene diversity. These pink salmon are inbreeding, they're hemorrhaging genetic traits, so that facilitates a degeneracy of traits. There was also, very interesting, in 2024, really recently, there was a study done on a huge population all over Norway of different pink salmon looking for parasites. And they found some, but actually one of the most interesting things that they emphasized in the paper was that there were these external lesions, bruises and reddening and just kind of decay, which correlated to an internal myopathy or a degradation of muscle, which was actually they were the muscles associated with migration and homing. And on top of that, they found the same myopathy in some fish that didn't have this external lesion. So again, it's the muscles are rotting on the fish, which is pretty crazy to think about. Yeah. And then also there was, from the beginning, they noticed that whereas before pink salmon would only show up in certain densities of rivers or certain amounts of flow, now they show up in everything. Small rivers, big rivers, doesn't matter. It seems that their exhibition of preference is gone. What did I have next? Right. Now, I'm actually the only one talking about this. The paper isn't out yet, so it's gonna be that way for a few more months at least. Excuse me. But actually, I'm a little bit worried about this other hypothesis that has begun to circulate, especially when it hits the news media outlets and it's treated as like the be-all, end-all truth of why the pink salmon are doing that, behaving this way, and that is, of course, the climate change hypothesis, which essentially goes that warming Arctic temperatures shorten developmental times, shift their place in trophic cascades, and increase fitness. Okay, that makes sense. That's definitely a part of the increased success of the pink salmon. Part of the problem is that the numbers just don't line up. If you, based on the model that the scientists which use this hypothesis were using, you should only see about a 15 to 20% increase in pink salmon, not a like 320 times increase, right? So it's also the problem that this should have been happening more or less gradually, whereas this explosion happened pretty much all at once. And it also doesn't account for shifts in behavior, preference, or physiology that we've seen. There are more in the paper, but you know how it is. So overall, I think it just falls flat. And it sort of puts us back into the question of a ongoing crisis of agency in science, which philosophers have been talking about for a long time. 5 minutes, okay. Yeah, so the Umweltdegeneracy hypothesis, part of it that breaks the orthodoxy is that it hinges on the agency of the species. But the discourse has, well, you know, it's a science thing. Who needs it? Now I was thinking about going into the whole like biosemiotics of the Umwelt, but clearly there's not enough time for that. It's really interesting stuff, but you know, another time. Yeah, so that leads me to sort of the most basic boiled down point of my overall theory of invasivity that I'm working on in this department, which is sort of a relation-oriented theory of invasive species. You know, species relate to their environments, they harmonize with it, they find kind of symbioses or natural physiological partnerships that kind of resonate with other creatures in their environment and larger system. They're Gaia, you know. But invasive species follow different laws. They, it seems that many of them do not relate, and I think that an invasive species is invasive when it does not relate, and because it does not relate, therefore proliferates. Pink salmon are a great example of that. They lose the ability to relate to a place, and so then they become invasive. But if we really want to get into it, you know, there might be levels more complicated about that. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about the original significance of salmon. Pretty much, I'll summarize it by saying pretty much universally, cultures that live alongside salmon recognize them as sort of like a universal beating lifeblood of the universe that brings nourishment not just to them, but to the animals and to the trees. Science corroborates this. In Western Canada, in riparian zones especially, anywhere between 30 and about 70% of the nitrogen that composes the trees, you've seen the redwood forests, are made of ocean derivative salmon carbon, or nitrogen, excuse me. So, yeah, that's kind of literally true. Yeah, and so just to talk about the relations that are forming between the indigenous folks there and the salmon, indigenous folks and also just the native Norwegians and Finns, it's a common sentiment to say it's not the river we grew up with. It's largely because gluts of dead pink salmon, once they breed, they die and just kind of wander and end up usually all in one place, or a few places. This is one such glut of pink salmon. You can imagine the stink. Yeah, and it's important to note that this is more meat than the Arctic scavengers can eat. If it was, if it was comparable to the Atlantic salmon, even within a few orders of magnitude, then the birds would be able to take care of it. But most of this ends up going to bacteria and algae, so it releases this stink and miasma into the world, changes the whole kind of Arctic nutrient economy, and accumulates a number of pejorative terms from the indigenous folks. Zombie salmon, because oftentimes either before or after they've spawned, the pink salmon kind of starts degenerating and rotting and swimming around like a zombie. Dog salmon, because it's salmon that only dogs can eat. Russelohe, which is a very racially insensitive term for Russians, because the Russians put it there. So, yeah, and the culture seems to be kind of going. Some people were for it, most people were against it. All of the elders of the Sami people are absolutely opposed. I mean, all the ones that I talked to and heard about are absolutely opposed to the pink salmon. They say it's not our salmon, it comes from somewhere else, it doesn't taste the same, it's not right, it's destroying the environment. But the Sami people are also quite adaptive. They've kind of accommodated technology on a number of different occasions through the history of their colonization. Here's a picture of, again, very happy Sami on a snowmobile. They love these things. As soon as they came around, no more whipping and riding the reindeer. That's makes a lot of sense. Yeah, in mapping out the kind of the conversations I had, there were a couple of young people that were favorable to the salmon, saying, there's an economic possibility here. It makes fishing a lot easier. But on the whole, most people were opposed to it, even the ones who were thinking maybe we can kind of make a tourist economy out of this new species were kind of and then in another survey conducted on Norwegian anglermen showed that something like 87% of Norwegian fishermen oppose pink salmon. So it's not being welcomed very well. This is just an idea that I'll leave out there, especially since we're doing an interdisciplinary kind of thing. It's worth knowing that the majority of biologically invasive species were distributed by globalizing economy, between 60 and 70%. And I think there's good cause to argue that even those that weren't directly spread that weren't directly spread by human commercial agents probably spread and became invasive largely due to the destabilizing ecological degradation which originates in modern human economic activity. Modern Western human economic activity, yep. So, I hope I fit within my 15 minutes. There's my contact, and I'd be happy to take some questions.
So, thank you very much, Thor. Are there any questions from public? Adam?
So where do you see these new roles? What's the new role of the species? How could we grab this problem and make it into something like, setting a path towards something? Like, where do you see the light in that tunnel?
So, because this is an ongoing invasion, it's hard to tell exactly how negative the futures are going to be. And if we want to be optimistic about that, we would say, we really don't know. The predators in the Atlantic Ocean probably haven't learned about the massive influx of oceanic pink salmon yet. And it's a common thing to see that when a new species is introduced to an area, there's a huge, big influx of it, and then the predators learn about it, and you start getting some fat orcas. But right now, it seems that the main future is that people are kind of turning from this is destroying the nutritional composition of the Arctic to, hey, this is a lot of meat that we can harvest from the seas. So there might be a pretty big economic opportunity in it. There probably will be. And I don't think... I can imagine no way to eliminate the pink salmon in the Arctic at this point. So it's going to be something that we have to learn to live with. I would hope that in time after this range expansion, the pink salmon again kind of start to settle and start partnering with their local environments a little bit more and maybe kind of balancing things out that way. Yeah, but those are the possibilities I'm aware of. Other than that, I don't know.
Thank you. Oh.
Yeah, can you please recap a bit what scientific discipline you base your hypothesis on? You mentioned biosemiotics, but is there some behavioral ecology involved or some other discipline which could explain?
So the whole argument of Umwelt degeneracy, of course, hinges on the Umwelt, which is treating the sort of interpretive agency of the creature as a part of the natural system. And so that, in that way, I'd say that it's basically biosemiotics. Other than that, I'm interested in sort of evolutionary systems dynamics, and we can't really get into that because that's my secret of my PhD. But we can talk a little bit, I don't know, can we talk a little bit about Umwelt? Maybe I'll do the first couple slides and I'll try to make that like 45 seconds. If I can get there in 45 seconds. Rah, rah, rah. Okay, maybe I can't. Well, basically, Umwelt translates to something like life world. It was a theoretical biologist named Jakob von Uexküll, an Estonian German, a Baltic German theoretical biologist who was very much inspired by a combination of marine physiology and Immanuel Kant, actually. So he wanted to kind of undergo a similar project to Kant of returning the subjective into a kind of harmony of nature, except not from categorical cognitive imperatives, but through the kind of process-embodied physiologies of organisms in nature. And he sort of wanted you to view nature, he had something called the compositional theory of nature, which is that all of nature works like a symphony and a harmony, which we could also talk about how destructive some of the applications of that idea became in no, maybe at the end. Yeah, and so looking at how organisms relate to other organisms in their environment, you can see, in a way analogous to the composition of classical music, points and counterpoints, like very close matchings of organisms. In this case, it would be between the salmon and the environment in different degrees of this, but there's things like the mirror orchid, which very well simulates a female wasp, which leads the drones to come in and pollinate it, or Rhodius amarus, which is this little European bitterling, which actually, it lays its eggs in the lips of the gills of a particular species of freshwater mussel. And this species also lays it kind of, quote unquote, parasitizes the Rhodius's gills to spread its larva. So very, very high degrees of sympathy and resonance existing between these creatures, and he believed that that was the purpose of ecological study, was to uncover these harmonic resonances between things. But again, that kind of tied him in with some like early 20th century German classicist ways of thinking, which played out bad politically, if I need not say more. Yeah? Okay. Good. I think that's...
Yeah, we will have a discussion after all. Okay, well, Thor, thank you very much. It has been a very nice talk. Tereza Stehlíková, she's an artist and theoretician as well, who spent most of her life in Great Britain, and she's focusing on our understanding of senses and perception, and she will tell us something about embodied knowing in an entangled world. So maybe we will get a little bit closer to what the Umwelt is. So Tereza, the word is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation to speak here. And I come from a very different background, so I just want to very briefly introduce myself. I'm an artist with a background in filmmaking, and I've been interested in sensory perception and embodiment for the past 20 years. So that's what I've been doing. And I want to talk here first about a book that I've just finished, and well, which is actually coming out this month. And because I think it kind of connects to some of these concerns that Adam asked me to talk about. So it's not directly talking about invasive species, but I think it's touching on a lot of the themes that came up even in the previous talk. But just very quickly to sort of introduce the context of my book, it's called Exiled from Our Bodies and How to Come Back to Our Senses. And it combines artistic research with a lot of dialogue that I've had with scientists and philosophers, more in the area of experimental psychology and cognitive neuroscience. So we're talking here about the human sensing that I've been focusing on. And of course, all of that happened because of this sort of sudden, like gradual but sudden in a last few years move towards this sort of mediated reality that's basically comes to us through our technological interactions. And so for me, the trigger really was the pandemic, just because it really heightened these conditions. But of course, it's a trajectory that we moving on for a long time, and of course, all of that's speeding up now with AI as well. So basically, what interests me is the contrast between direct, sort of embodied experience or being present, and the idea of being represented through these screens that are increasingly mediating all of our experiences, from learning to interacting with our friends. And as a filmmaker, I felt that was a topic that I've been looking into, and I've been working with it. So the idea of a screen was the starting point for me, and of course screen these days can mean things that it's becoming a kind of expanded screen. It's no longer only confined to like a rectangle. But basically, why does the audiovisual representation have such power over us? That was my question. How can it speak to our sense of touch, smell? And we all know that it can, and it can kind of suck us in, and that's both the power of it, but also there is a kind of danger. Actually, I'll just stay with this. So basically, I thought sort of playfully in the context of this symposium, I wanted to think about technology, a kind of invasive, I mean, technology is a big term, but the digital devices that we're using, or whether it's AI, it's a kind of invasive species that's altering and getting in the way of how we interact with our environment. And here there are a lot of opportunities, but I think there are also a lot of dangers that we need to be conscious of. In my book, one of my chapters is called Permeability of Being. Again, it kind of touches on some of the things that just been said from a human perspective also. And it's this idea that we actually, we are not complete in ourselves. We are a kind of work in progress. And we are very dependent on the environment that shapes us and becomes a kind of extension of ourselves. So there's this sort of permeability and provisionality and a kind of incompleteness that is part of our human nature, and that's both something that's very well, that's what we are. We are very relational beings. That's some of our strength, but it's also some of the space for exploitation, or that can be exploited, or that can make us very vulnerable to well, to technological or other kind of influences. Actually, that's my photo of a spider web. But so these sort of words that have been used a lot, maybe overused, but I think they are very important. So that we are, so the word entanglement, we are actually totally entangled with the social world, with the physical world, with places, spaces. And it's very hard to think of ourselves as only these self-contained units. There is a lot of reciprocity happening in the way we relate through the senses, and I'll speak about the senses as well. And I think there's a very important space for empathy. And I'm going to talk about empathy on a kind of sensory level. So through my research, I've been in dialogue with scientists looking into how our senses interact. So something that people sometimes call synesthesia, but actually synesthesia is more of a neurological aberration. But what we all share is something called the cross-modal interactions or correspondences. So basically, our senses are in constant dialogue with each other, and they kind of, in this mutual dialogue, they're giving us a unified experience of being in the world. The architect and philosopher Juhani Pallasmaa, he talks about this, he calls it the existential sense. That's what he came up with. Maybe other people call it different things. But it's this sort of sense of experiencing reality, which we take for granted until something goes wrong. And that also I've used some of these examples in my book. So there's a kind of reciprocity between our senses as well, and in that way, our way of so sensing is not a passive experience. Even like if you think about touch, here it's much more clear. So if you touch something, it's also touching you back. So there's a very direct reciprocity, which actually exists for all the senses. So vision as well. There is actually a kind of very direct way that images affect us. And I'm coming at it from now from a kind of artistic angle as well, not just scientific. So there is this constant dialogue between us and the world that we need to pay attention to. Another sort of theme that I've been very interested in, and it connects then with the journal that I edit, which I'm going to speak about at the end, is this idea of environment as a sort of having objective qualities, something like the genius loci of a place or an atmosphere that, for example, Václav Cílek, the Czech geologist and philosopher, talks about approaching a place, that each place has its own way of speaking to us, that we can pick it up if we're sensitive enough, if we pay attention enough, and if our bodies are sensitive enough through our senses. And so this is the idea of this like common territory, and I'm talking about it very literally here, but of course there's also metaphorical aspects to it, which connect to my journal. Again, this is something that's taken from my book, and I found that very interesting, and that's to do with sort of meaning that actually flows beneath language and beneath, well, beneath all the categories that we as humans make in order to sort of hold on to sort of stability in the world, to make some sense out of all these sort of rhythms and patterns. So we name things, we give them forms, but sometimes these categories can kind of stop us from accessing this direct sense of being alive. And Claire Petit-Mengin is a French scientist and philosopher who is doing very interesting research into microphenomenology. So basically how this idea when you have a thought, like where does the thought emerge from? What comes before? It's I don't have the time to go into it now, but I just wanted to mention it here. Okay, so now I wanted to come, and in my book I'm doing the same thing. I want to also have some practical points that how might we work with this knowledge and how might we make this useful. I'm talking again from a point of view of an artist, but I think it's relevant to how we bring up our children as well. I've recently read an article in The Guardian about how in the UK, in the last 200 years, the connection to nature dropped by 60%. So people's sort of connection to nature. So something that gets passed on by parents to their children, which I think in the Czech Republic is actually still pretty good. But obviously, if you go into like big cities, some children don't even know where milk comes from. So again, how do we reconnect with our environment? Which I think is, in my view, it's the first step to actually addressing or to even addressing the ecological crisis. This very quickly, this idea of artistic knowledge, because I teach artistic research to PhD students. That's a very interesting area because what is it? Many people still don't know what actually this artistic research means and how does it compare to scientific research, what is experiential knowledge, and so on. So, I mean, I actually really like the theories and the writing of the American philosopher Mark Johnson, who talks about artistic research and actually what is knowledge. You know, the idea that knowledge is not some sort of fixed entity that's permanent, that actually it's a process of getting to know. It's again, a work in progress. It's a constant sort of metamorphosis, and for that we need to be fluid and kind of adaptable, and we need to work with uncertainty and yeah. I'm sorry because I had notes on my presentation, but I can't access them, so I'm improvising it all. So I'm probably forgetting a lot. And here, that's another kind of, for me, very interesting theme is liminal spaces. Also call it safe space for uncertainty. But it's basically this idea, when I think about art-science collaboration, it's sometimes very difficult because of these very different aims. or different ways of working. It was actually the physicist, the David Bohm, that talks about, and he worked with Einstein, but he was very interested in the role of arts, and he talks there about the idea that if we sort of move too much into some sort of abstraction of theories, sometimes we can't see anymore the new solutions. And actually, in that moment, it's very important to return to direct sensory experience, which is what the arts can give, because at that point we can perceive things in a new way. So a space where habits can be reconfigured. Am I okay? How am I going for time? Still running out. Okay. Imagination, I'm just going to mention it because it's a very important sense that actually artists work with, but also scientists need, and it's maybe like one of the last spaces that we need to protect against corporations, and so just want to mention that. And finally, here, just very quickly, to speak about my journal, which I've already mentioned. So this is, it's an online platform, which is partly ironic, given that I'm talking about direct sensory experience, but it's also a space that allows me to connect communities across the world. So there is a kind of advantage in that. And it's basically a cross-disciplinary journal talking about the importance of making sense with all our senses. These are examples of the last two editions. So this very last one is this one called Ways of Knowing, and that was basically focused on methods of how do we know things, and how do we engage in a dialogue. I've got contributions there from David Abram and from artists. So just wanted you to know about that as well. It's open to submissions again, and the next theme is liminal spaces. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for interesting talk. Are there any questions from the public? Thor.
So, yes. I wanted to say just right off the bat, it's a real pity that you forgot your notes, because if it was anything like the visuals that you brought to this presentation, then it would have been just absolutely lovely. Now, we are talking about spaces and textures and sensual immediacy and presence, but we didn't get to hear much about invasive species, which are clearly, one of the ways that our spaces are changing today. So I just wanted to open the space for you to maybe say some words on what invasivity means to you, or how you might foresee these borders mingling, if you follow me. Yeah. So.
Yes. No. Thank you. Well, I think that was my kind of uncertainty actually coming here, and I wanted to be very open about it, because I tried to. Invasive species is not something I'm dealing with at all, but I got invited here, I think, because of this sort of cross-disciplinary dialogue happening, and so I thought, well, I like the challenge of being sort of in a different context.
I actually, a more precise way of asking it, if we didn't have a ready answer for that, I was very interested in the photo that you had when you were talking about artistic learning of the snail crawling on the skin, and maybe not to lay it all out, but a lot of people would touch a snail or be touched by a snail and think, ooh, yuck, off, which kind of has maybe an invasive relationship between the person and the snail, such that to open oneself to experiencing the snail is already sort of a play of these habituated boundaries and textures. So maybe you could tell me specifically about that experience, if that
Yes.
was, yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, thank you. That's a nice, very specific, very sensory question. Yes, I put the snail on myself because I thought it would be an interesting tactile experience. It was extremely unpleasant. It was very, but like you say, it was something that maybe it's like a silly thing to do, but actually it was very interesting. That's all I can say. Sometimes I think we need to just do silly things as well as artists to kind of push beyond this very like, oh, is this okay? Is this rational enough? Is this useful enough? You just don't know until you try.
Okay, well, that was an interesting question. So thank you very much again for the talk. And now I would like to invite Michal Mitro, who is our colleague from Slovakia, but now based in Brno. And he will tell us something about how to relate, but not to the animals, but to non-animal entities. Non-human, but maybe non-animal as well? Yeah, okay, it will be about plants. So, Michal, the word is yours.
Hello. So I'll be reading, I hope you don't mind, but please enjoy the video. Okay. And yeah, so thank you very much for having me here. I'm Michal, as has been said, but you can also call me Miju. I'll skip the introduction, and no, I won't. I'm an artist and a researcher in my own practice, but today I will share from a position of a curator and caretaker at Sassy Space, an independent cross-disciplinary organization based in Brno. For those of you who don't know, that's like 3 hours east from here. And when Adam invited me to think of a contribution on the topic of coexistence with invasive species, I thought of 2 core projects that we've been developing at SESI. One which is already finished, the open urban forest, and the other one that is about to extend in the future and building on the first one. So in the first project, my role was that of guidance and facilitation. And as you can see already, we're going for a walk to our site, starting from the street level and climbing all the way up and then descending back again. And the site of these 2 projects' interest is the Sassy Space itself, as has been said. And it is everywhere you can see, and then further extending left and right, which you will not see. But just imagine it's sort of large. And so the Open Urban Forest was a 6-month research project exploring how the human and the more than human work with and around each other. And these explorations were situated in this specific context of a nature-reclaimed communal garden located on the hills of Svratka in Brno. And even if the place is not being shaped directly by humans as a garden anymore, it is still shaped by a multitude of human-initiated contexts, such as traffic infrastructure extension, drought, municipal urban planning, and others. So at the same time, it is becoming increasingly feral and harder to access, as you can see at this very moment. And throughout the project duration, guest experts from fields of architecture, forestry, visual arts, field recording and performance, they visited the forest and conducted their research. And the guests were invited to observe, analyze, abstract, and speculate on meanings and data sets that the forest conveys to them and to which they happen to incline. And equipped with our unique tools, knowledges, and viewpoints, we're hoping to jointly shape an intersubjective representation of the forest that would reflect its stacked and multifocal nature. And by doing so, we were hoping to set an inviting and supportive base for the interspecies dialogue. So that's one of my topics. And reinforce dynamics that would make the space open, urban, and forest. And now the project's over, and the data has been collected and the artworks executed. So you may want to know what are the takeaways. And I must disappoint you, because I have no numbers or graphs to present you with. But I do have other takeaways that are mostly intuitive and emotional. But nevertheless, I believe this doesn't render them unimportant. So before I share those with you, I'll talk about the threads that unite each input from the guests, and that's first and foremost the human condition that we all share, or the anthropocentrism. And then it's only the second, the context of the forest that we were examining and where we perform our activities. And we were constantly reminded that it is us humans conducting the research and not the other way around, and that the motivations are ours, and the egos are ours, and the failures are ours as well. But now to the takeaways. These may be so banal that they can actually be easily overlooked, but I believe that makes it even more important to explicitly verbalize them. So here are four main takeaways. I've said this word so many times. One, being aware of who and how we are and why we act as we do, starting with reflection on our very humanity and extending that towards race, class, gender, and all the way down to personal motivations. Second, accepting our human nature and using it as a departure point for informed action. Third, being able to appreciate the lack of acting and lack of personhood of the modern human world, which doesn't imply lack of agency or intelligence. And four, learning from our natural surroundings that we as well can sit still, listen, attend, and let grow. And these four findings are our departure point for navigating the space and thinking about who and how is claiming it and who and how may benefit that. And also you may have noticed that we are now descending the slope, which marks the second part of the presentation. And I must share, that's a joke now, a trigger warning for those who don't like traveling in trains backwards. And also at the same time, it's a pro tip on how to easily increase the length of your presentation by just with a few clicks. But back to the point, the second project is called Stories of Stewardship, and it's a Creative Europe project, which we hope to start at the beginning of next year. The aim of the project is to narrate empowering stories about care, mutuality, and interdependence in the context of challenging natural and societal transitions we are facing in Europe and beyond. The project will explore and propose practical tools and poetic metaphors on how we can relate to our non-human natural surroundings and to each other anew. It takes place at 4 locations, since we're 4 partners, and each project partner is developing a unique stewardship model towards their respective site. To draw a better picture for you, our partner in Sweden, Feral Malmo, explores the uncultured places and entities sprouting at various times and contexts in the urban backdrop of the port city. Their ventures relate directly to the history of colonization, global trade and migration, both human and non-human, as ships carrying merchandise from all corners of the planet would also transport distant seeds, exotic animals, and initiate new feral ecosystems. Our second partner, Trajna, is based in Ljubljana, and they're navigating, researching, and taking care of what they aptly call krater, which is a huge hole surrounded by a brown field of several blocks in size in the wider city center. The krater is both a reminder of an unfinished development project, but also an inspiring example of just how may nature reclaim the hostile construction site and transform it into a green refuge hosting multitude of species as well as human activities. Our third partner is Experimental Station for Research on Art and Life, which operates on a former industrial farming lot at Snago Lake, which is 40 minutes, I think, north of Bucharest. And through collective effort, they transformed the monocultured land into diverse and flourishing ecosystem that hosts their cultural and communal activities. And as for CC, you already get a glimpse. And the need that we're addressing with this project is a perceived lack of frameworks and toolkits that would combine lived experience that has been mentioned here and mind-opening narratives that would in turn guide us in relating to the complexities of environmental and societal crises. So this may sound rather abstract, but we want to start our activities in very grounding position, which I mean literally. So, which actually working with the land in our urban and rural environment, which we see as a great starting point that is relatable, feels familiar, and establishes a safe physical space to explore difficult questions. The project's multifaceted and interdisciplinary, but we are choosing approachable language and storytelling as a sharing strategy, and by relating to our more than human landscape, especially the transitioning one, we aim to cultivate our sensitivity towards the unknown and foreign, which then can be metaphorically transposed to the landscape of human societies, which perhaps is a fitting example. The way we relate to the so-called invasive species and the way we talk about them is by standard one-sidedly negative. And it is perhaps surprising how close this narrative can be to the one that we use to address immigrants and their families. And staying in this metaphor, well, my 10 minutes are over. It is this sort of metaphorical position we would like to exploit as well, to talk about difficult questions in this safe sort of apolitical space, which is not fully apolitical, but may feel like it. And we want to devise stories and activities that allow us to relate to those we don't know and create both mental and physical space for imagination and mutuality. Thank you very much for your time and attention. This was my presentation.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. So, are there any questions from public? If there are not, I would like to ask you maybe a silly question. So I saw the space there that you are using. Obviously, there are more people coming. What are you doing, or what is the what? So you were talking about that the attendance of such spaces is good for. You know, like thinking about the nature and maybe seeing what is going on with it, and maybe you can also like apolitically think about some solutions of crisis or those kind of things. So what is like the real process that you are conducting here at this site? So what are you doing there?
Thank you for your question. I thought this would be clear after the presentation, but apparently it's still a lot of space to elaborate. Well, we run a cultural program there, so it's a residency space. We have a gallery, which is also a former garden hut, so we called it a wood cube instead of a white cube. And we also host a community sauna, which was built last year as part of another artist residency we host. So these are our regular activities, and the two projects I talked about are sort of, I would say, larger projects that kind of think of the whole area as an some sort of Gesamtkunstwerk, or like this layered artwork that maybe needs, or I think I see a lot of like inspiration and metaphorical content there, but perhaps it needs like some sort of interpretation and facilitation to make this knowledge and information accessible to someone who hasn't spent 10 years of their life there and looking around thinking of what could mean what. So this is what we do. It started very, how deep should I go?
I was just wondering what happened during the time you spent there, and what are the, you know, like regular visit activities that you are doing there. Now you mentioned 10 years, so I guess the place changed
10 years
a lot.
Changed a lot from sort of like trying to, from this colonial, now I say colonial, but back then I would say like standard mindset of trying to make the place serve my interest and make it the most easiest and to navigate and most accessible for myself and for my needs. Also thinking like how I may potentially monetize the place, or like just how can I exploit it, how it can be useful for me. Didn't take very long for me to realize it's very hard to do anything at all there because the nature is so much more powerful there than me alone. It would be a different case if I was a developer with a lot of technology and money, or if we were like a large determined community, which back then it was just myself. Anyway, so that was like this sort of like a natural evolution of trial and error, often leading to some sort of personal failure. Just like the Open Urban project was like me proposing, oh, let's find a way of let's find a way of relating to non-human entities, you know. But like, how do you relate to something that doesn't speak to you, which is our main communication channel? And also, you don't. As an opportunity to use technology, like to collect data, which then you can interpret as some sort of information, but it's like kind of very one-sided. Or there's like a realm of myth and magic or folklore, where you can also use some sort of intuition and interpretation to relate to non-human entities. But I wanted to avoid both of them and sort of like stay grounded, but still come with like some non-banal findings, which I believe the 4 ones are, even though perhaps they're still very general, but for me they're important, like as a very good starting point for like a further examination. And now we're at the point where I want to synthesize this knowledge and also invite other collectives and experts to share their stance at how they relate to the places that they've been navigating with care and interest that is like genuine and is not stemming from thinking of how they may exploit this place or how it can be useful for them, but how they can live in some sort of symbiosis, or how it can become, how to like literally develop mutuality. So that's, yeah. But back to concrete, yeah, I think most common you would come to sauna, most probably. Most commonly, every second Sunday you can come to a community sauna. Or you're a resident artist and then you live there on site. That's our most frequent guests.
Okay, well.
Does that answer?
Yeah, well, it answers. Maybe now the question would be like, what is the mutuality? How? Okay, so I can imagine that the sauna helps me, maybe help me to think about stuff. And where is the mutual mutual side? What is the other side for the non-human beings there?
Yeah. Good question. And I've been thinking about it as well. I can't tell what is the, or other way around. So there is no direct physical benefit for the trees that we're burning to heat the sauna. They apparently don't benefit us having the sauna there. But like this started to be an issue. So it's a wood-fired sauna. We only have like solar panels, so it's not enough power to run sauna, because producing heat or producing cold is the most power sucking appliance of electricity you can have. So we use just like a Petri stove, basically, like slightly pimped up, but it's just a small stove. And we used like old wood that we found around or that we chopped down to make space for something else. And now we're sort of like, we're not fully running out. Like it's, as you've seen, there's a lot of trees, but I've been thinking, okay, well, if we keep doing these saunas, this forest will turn into a non-forest eventually. And also my son was telling me we should like make the sauna less hot so that we save the firewood. And I think like, so I try to approach it from a more, or in a wider context with more of a complexity that there is to it. Like we haven't reached this point where we need to like chop healthy trees, and I think if we do, we just like go around other abandoned gardens and look for other trees. Even then, we still shouldn't take all the old trees because they serve as a home for like microorganisms and also are nutrients for the soil, etc., etc. So it like triggers a lot of questions and opens discussions. Which I think is perhaps one contribution, that it makes us think about what we do, like was one of the conclusions. And two, it brings people who don't care about what we do, just want to, you know, enjoy themselves basically, which is perfectly fine. And it's sort of like, we're sort of like extending the community of people who are interested in what we do by having this like, pleasant community moments together in the environment that itself is perhaps not very pleasant or it's not very comfortable for human, but to sit on the steep slope after your sauna and then go back to sauna is fine. Just to go there and sit there, perhaps for many people, is a waste of time. So so by hosting the saunas, we're like sort of extending or we're like infiltrating the minds of people who may not be interested in topics we are. And that's not like being sneaky, that just like happens naturally or organically. We're obviously like not trying to force our ideology or spread like weird ideas, but so I think those are the two benefits.
It's nice. Also the deforestation may be a good way how to think about the landscape. Okay, so thank you very much again for the talk. And now I would like to welcome back Adamem Vačkář, and he will tell us about his projects on hogweed and maybe more.
Hello, and welcome again. So I will maybe stand up because it's much nicer up here. And so I just want to say a little bit about like the whole kind of intent. Coming back to this idea of this gathering is to see how different people approach kind of similar themes. Also, I have other questions, so we can address all these questions later through this very short panel. I'm gonna go through very briefly through this thing that triggered this gathering, also, which is the idea the giant hogweed, which is an invasive plant that I've found in the Czech forest in the suburb of Prague, and through the COVID period. And since then, it hasn't left me, and I find it fascinating how. And I lived together with this plant for say 4 years, and. So this whole genesis of this plant is very interesting because it originally came from Caucasus. And it has been since, there are first records of this plant in Europe from 1917 at Kew Gardens in London. So this plant has spread from there, from this center in London to most of the North Hemisphere in Eurasia and also in the North America, but also in South America, certain parts of New Zealand, etc. What is specific about this plant and why it triggered my attention? And I was kind of trying to analyze this kind of, this trigger of like, why would I be interested in this kind of obscure plant, which is a kind of a huge dill. It's up to 5 meters high, and it contains a toxic sap. So when you touch it and there's light, so the condition to be active in your skin, it's photoactive. So that means like throughout the day, if you touch this plant, you get burns. Basically, you have huge swollen parts, and then you get burns, which I have experienced occasionally too. And this plant was kind of this natural curiosity of having something exotic. So this exotic element was the essence of this spread, because people took it for ornamental plant. They've been sharing the nobles have been sharing extensively this plant in noble gardens, and that's also how it got into the Czech Republic or Czech Austro-Hungary at that period. And it was introduced in the Western Bohemia, and the first records are there. Lázně Kynžvart or Marienbad, etc. All this region. This is another map showing the countries that it has been spreading to. Well, and actually, my biggest question that I also would like to ask Tereza afterwards also has been puzzling me as an artist and researcher. Like, what does it mean to do this artistic research, and how does it influence our capacity of being poetic or using the arts? And this is the kind of latest question I have. I have been researching about this plan. I've been asking scientists, talking to people, as well as Tereza. She's been excessively doing symposia and talking to scientists. But on what extent do we absorb these informations, and how do we process them as artists? That's my biggest kind of question of addressing this problem. How do we relate to it? So far, I've been, this plan has been portrayed through fear, mostly in the media. So everyone in this country mostly knows this. As soon as you mention this plan, everybody says, "Oh my God, this is this horrible plan." Everybody knows more or less about it because it has been in the news. But I think I was kind of attracted by this oddness of this plant, that nobody likes it. So I started to like it, and I like this odd phase of this faded plant when it has died in the autumn or throughout the summer. Not this beautiful plant in the spring which is blooming, but this kind of ghost plant that is out there. So what has happened, that this plant has spread from these castle gardens, these exotic gardens that is built for decoration, into the landscape. It has gone wild, and now it's looking at us from the back of the gardens as a kind of a demon or a ghost. And very similar to the salmon, it has kind of it has gone wild, and it's absolutely impossible to eradicate it. So there have been different studies. There is a whole legislation around this plant, which I have discovered throughout my research, that it's very precise, it's very well financed, and it's mandatory. So if you own a terrain and the hogweed is growing there, you must eradicate it, and you can get optionally finances from the European government, from the European Commission, but it's your duty that you do it. And if you don't, then there's like I would say there, as far as I remember, there's 40,000 euro fine if you do not eradicate this plant. So this responsibility has been shifted from the government to each of us, but so this has been this portrayal of this plant as this very toxic, people in these suits, toxic suits, sort of say, and I've been asking different people of different domains how they see this plant, because I liked this plant and I couldn't believe this kind of negative image it had. And so I've been asking this very reputed Dr. Pišek, who is the person who is the most cited Czech biologist in the world. Actually, because of this giant hogweed, it has been his expertise since the 90s, which there was this whole this boom of this plant in the west of the Bohemia, especially, and he said that was the easiest thing to do because it was very clearly visible. So he started to mapping the locations where the hogweed is, and he started to study this chemical compounds. How does it spread? What kind of impact does it have in how kind of a deep change in the soil it makes in terms of chemical changes, etc. And this is Mark Spencer, who is also equally an invasive biologist, forensic biologist from the UK. So these people have been explaining me this reasoning through the optics of biology, which are extremely interesting in terms of the analysis of the real. But I realized soon enough that there are many biases. As much as we look, we are one of these players on this earth, as we know, and we tend to judge the things, in my opinion, far too much and label them good or bad. So we create this biased world. This Rosetta Elkin, who's a landscape architect, she's questioning these attitudes as well. Like, how do we like for example, forestation, or how we deal with forests? We tend to plant trees, but the forest, for example, spread naturally. We don't need to plant them. That's her opinion. There's this anthropologist. Abigail Perez-Lager from the New School, she talks very interesting about the hogweed as how we can relate to it. We have different options, different possibilities of optics through anthropology, addressing it through healing, eventually through technology. But these are all kind of different optics that we can share regarding that. So I've been questioning this idea of like what is the role of this hogweed? Like, what is the new ecological role that I've been curious in Thor's agenda or research, that like where there has to be some kind of meaning to it, like being here now. So I've been wondering, I've been collecting images, footage, etc. Making it precious occasionally, this kind of damned, doomed plant that has been condemned widely, and from this angel being transformed in our eyes into a kind of a devil or a ghost. I brought it back to its origin, to the Caucasus. I've been to Armenia, into a botanical garden, making it kind of like shifting it toward this kind of a precious plant being in a botanical garden. I've experienced myself on my skin also the burns, it was not on purpose, but I've been filming in the field, one of the last fields in the Western Bohemia, how this plant, is like one of the last big fields in the Western Bohemia. I've been filming there, and a few days later ended up in the hospital with huge burns. And it was a very interesting experience in terms of being grounded in this kind of whole holistic endeavor and this craziness about this planet I've been engaged in for 4 years. And taking it for this kind of new spiritual plant, and I thought this is like kind of it's an optics, it's a prism, it's a way of seeing, for me at least, like that led me to research, to learn about things from the biologists, anthropologists, etc. But I learned that it's real, that it burns and it does things, and so I'm still asking, like, I found the role of this plant, which is somehow for me it's a prism. It's the recognition that we need to give these new beings, like where they are, what they do. There is a reason for it, certainly. For me, the meaning is that it's a plant that opens minds, that opens the biased world into something that some more nuanced understanding that we need to have towards these non-human agents. And so this is one of the installations I did. I did several conceptual framings of this plant. One of them was this in this Baroque palace. I tried to portray it as a kind of rehabilitated, as this exotic beauty, putting it there like people were taking pictures. It looked beautiful, etc. somehow like bring it back to our attention and shed a positive light on it. But I've been living with this plant, so it's been in my studio, it's been everywhere around me for 4 years. Somehow it became a kind of obsession. I've been going to the fields. I have a kind of secret garden, which is not mine occasionally, but it's in this kind of known place in the suburb of Prague, close to an electric power plant, where people do not go. There is no interest. There is no interest of people to be there. So they don't eradicate it. But actually, this plant is nowadays escaping the eradication endeavors, and it's kind of living on a very kind of deserted places elsewhere, and on the borders of terrains, or on terrains where people do not engage, or they don't. The ownership is unclear, etc. I realized that as an artist, it's really hard to use words or this research and implicate it in my artistic work. Over the time, I have realized that this is not the substance of the artistic. I mean, at least as I see it, it's really hard to translate information into emotion. But I took it as a kind of digestion or kind of like a translation into emotions. Based on all this information, I started to create works. And so, so I've been documenting extensively. This is just a small fragment of all these things. I've been touching the plant because it's toxic in the night, so it doesn't burn me. And I would like to invite you later to this show, which is at NOD, eventually close by, to show you around what was the detailed works that led to these outcomes. Actually, what does it mean, etc. What is behind? Actually, just like to say very quickly, I've been using copper. I find copper interesting in a way that it's an energetic conductor, but electricity or energy, both. I've been using these copper plating, and so again, this dry plant that looks like a ghost or kind of, it's ugly, making it back again somehow attractive. But the idea is more conceptual than aesthetic. Well, I'll be very short. This is it, but I would like to tell you more at the show, so please come. Now we will make this panel, if you don't mind. Just like I think we had a lot of information, we just make a quick panel of 15 minutes. I would like to ask everyone, what's next? Actually, that's my question. I mean, we've heard a lot of condemnation. We've been labeling these species as invasive species, which has its specific reason, because the invasive species, they are very little part of these non-native species, and they were being named invasive because they have been spreading and changing the environment profoundly. This is happening. It's changing. Our environment is full of these plants, and our country here as well. So I would just like to discuss what can we do. I mean, what is there to do? How can we change the optics?
So yeah, how about we do it right now? Like if I can welcome all the speakers in front. So obviously, all of you are trying to somehow do a research that you call a research from different perspectives, no? As a biologist, I have my idea what the research supposed to be. Yeah? So one very important part of the research is repeatability. So that's what we are asked now in research, is to do things that are repeatable. So the conclusions that we reached, to describe them the way that somebody else can come and do the same thing. That's what we are asked. So is there any repeatability in what you are doing? Somebody wants to answer, maybe?
Maybe I'll just say, I mean, yeah, it's something I think a lot about in the context of what I teach, and I suppose it comes down to subjectivity of experience. So if we're talking about, like Adam mentioned, emotion, you know, there's this sort of big, well, it's what artists work with. It's very important for our human experience, but of course, like you could probably measure some kind of physiological reaction, but how do you actually compare people's experience of things? I think that's where I suppose we're working with like a qualitative data or whatever you call it.
It doesn't have to be data. Only it just you know, like artistic expression is also like subjective. Maybe so. Yeah, you can measure the reactions of people, but the moment that they come is maybe unrepeatable. And that's my question. Do you think that maybe the arts is not possible to take it as a research or compare to research, because maybe it's context dependent, it's dependent on the situation, different people feel differently about, but the things that you are doing, maybe you can repeat them afterwards, no? You also have methods, or have you thought about this? And
may I? Yeah, I think it's as you said, like methodology or the processes are repeatable, but the outputs are varying. So for me, that doesn't render it. It still makes it a research, but then it's not science, perhaps, because you should ideally arrive to the same conclusion, right? If in the lab conditions, if everything is repeated exactly, the result should be give or take the same. Whereas for instance, I could take my 4 points and instruct people to like spend some time thinking of it and then come with some sort of response. And I don't think I may get similar responses, but not the same. So maybe it's about like I'm not so much interested in the exactnness of it, but in like a larger scale of impact that it can bring, which perhaps would be in like a similar direction, even across the varying responses or results.
Yeah, well, Adam wants to comment.
I would like to say that it's very different, actually. It doesn't have anything to do with the scientific research, because, as Tereza said, there is something about this human condition, but also, as we talked about science, what is the science, I mean, the scientific environment about, it's very close to what is artistic environment. There is certain way of doing it. Like, why do you, for example, choose, you know, this or that theme? There is a certain human condition, even for the science, and also I've been talking to scientists. There is a lot of biases, there is a lot of prejudices, there is a lot of framing of the time, of the period they're living in. So I think there is no repeatability in the arts. I mean, I think it's absolutely different, but I think the input of some tangible information, that's what makes it different. I think art is very much soaked, impregnated with a lot of anthropological, but mostly social discourses, and that makes it a little bit fuzzy, blurry. I think, for me at least, the scientific information is very much more kind of credible or tangible at some point than these anthropological.
And I think also, like, yeah, with arts, there's this, it's like going back to the complexity. I think that's like often when I worked with experimental psychologists and we discussed these things, and there was always this like issue of like, yeah, but if I want to do an experiment, I need to isolate all the variables, and I need to like simplify in order to measure the outcome. And I would say, well, I want the opposite. You know, I want to make things more complex and more ambiguous and more unclear. And at that point, we couldn't find a common language somehow.
Well, that's interesting. Well, another thing I wanted to ask regarding the research is, so one of the features that the research aims to do is to reach some conclusions and then share the conclusions with others that can critically evaluate it and maybe then promote another work that tries to falsify the conclusions or test them and so on and so on, and that way changing the paradigm that exists. Do you think that in what you are doing, you have ever tried after even record the conclusions of the work that you have done, and then based on some reviews or feedback, try to redo it other ways to make it more clear, maybe, or?
Well, I'd like to start by saying I'm having a hard time following everything we're talking about, but ever since we've been naming kind of this transmission of information and methodology, I couldn't stop thinking about the sauna and the sinister distribution of weird ideas. I know you're spreading weird ideas, but I mean, this is all kind of a dative. A lot of it's kind of a dative scientific form of the question of how do we reproduce this information and discuss it. But I wouldn't be surprised if in this kind of meditative moment outside of the sauna, people had a lot of very real realizations, maybe about their relationship to nature or urban nature spaces in a way that's kind of reproducible. It's just the products that are being reproduced aren't streamlined. It's the methodology. So, yeah. So I just wanted to share that in my head, this is all happening in context with the sauna trip. So.
Thank you.
But I would like to reply to your question, and I think there is a kind of conclusion. I think for me, at least, I was pushed by the PhD program that I'm doing, right? Like, what's the conclusion? Like, where's your opinion? Like, they were pushing me last years, just like just saying, this and that, all this kind of parts of the research, and I've come to the conclusion that, I mean, for me, for at least, there is. For this part, being as addressing this problem as an artist, there is a symbolic meaning. There is we can allow ourselves in the arts mix to different inputs, science, anthropology, whatever we can. It's a kind of big DJ kind of set that we can mix stuff. But I think the output is important because we have to make some kind of thesis. And as I said, for me, this diabolized plant is a transformative plant. It brings us to a new paradigm of the new ecological roles of these plants. Something's happening with this planet, but there's a perpetual change that's happening. It has always been happening. There has never been a still moment. So this is a part of the change, and it's showing this change, at least.
And if I can just say, I think with this sort of artistic research question and this practice-based, some people call it practice-based research, I think the point, Adam, you've made about actually, it's one thing to read about the plant and find out all the way it moved and migrated and spread. And the other thing is, well, for one to be burnt by it and to feel it. Here we're talking about the sensory stuff, but to also then work with it and to to paint it in the copper, to cover it in the copper, to put it in a space like that. That creates meaning that you wouldn't get through theoretical text. It's like you have to do it. And you have to have this artistic sort of aesthetic feeling with it.
I also think the experience is very important. I don't get that. So, you can read a masterpiece in literature or maybe even a paper. I don't have that sensitivity developed. That then you get the shivers on your body, and that it does something to you. But I think art can do this in a non-textual way. So I think for me it's not important to, share this with a circle of reviewers, but to it's important for me to people to come in person and experience it, and then see if that impacts them or if it does something to them, because I think that's where like the beginning of transformation begins, with like a physical sensation, I believe. So I think that's what, as an artist, we have this like privilege to work in this realm of sensations and experiencing.
I think that's why I put the snail on myself. I think it was part of the...
But I put a snail on myself as well, and it tried to eat me. Yeah, so don't put snails on yourselves.
Well, they have. It's called radula, and it was kind of like
crazy. They will eat
scratching you, know, on the surface.
Slowly but steadily, they will eat you.
Yeah, but steadily, yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. No, I didn't mean to really like make arts technical, but I understand that there are different ways, maybe looking at the world. But you know, like science claims to be objective and refer to some, or at least trying to refer to some ground truth. And I think that arts also is trying to do it. Do you see some problems of the two methods or two approaches, and why do we even have to speak about them? Like, is it either this or that, or is there any way to maybe make it more transactional, or?
Can I mean, I think for me the problem comes with the fact that sciences somehow are the thing that our society kind of like, that's where the money goes, that's taken more seriously. And I think the arts are kind of desperately trying to fit into these models. That's how it feels from my perspective.
It's desperate on the science side as well. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I think it's almost like if we didn't have to, in the art world, to try and somehow make it look like scientific research, and to sort of stand up to like the value of sort of poetic inside, or the role of emotion and all these things that I think are dismissed in our in this context. It's not serious enough if it's got emotion. Well, actually, emotion is extremely important, as I'm sure all biologists know, for survival. So, yeah. Yeah, no, I think I could go on, so I don't want to.
I think that the scientific research is more objective than the artistic research. Like.
Well, I didn't judge between those. I just said it's a name. There is like inherent aim for trying to be trying to be objective. It's like that's something that the approach, the research, and science is based on inherent honesty. Without honesty, if and this has been happening with problems that science that occurs in science when the science is not honest, and there are false results that when it happened and it's not discovered, that it can basically destroy all that have been reached with the science. If this would be there, or if it will be there, then it will become useless. No, and
Indra, can I steal the question?
And the objectivity is in this. Like they try. Well, the science tries to describe it so it's repeatable, so it's honest, and so it's related to what the contemporary best knowledge is. Yeah.
Yes, but I think the artist research is the same, but it's inside.
Could I take a stab at
please.
talking to this?
Please.
Science and art, both, as with any kind of circulation of social entities, media, symbols, whatever it is, have different criteria of truth. So, just really basically, if art is true, maybe because it gives you the tingles and you feel it and it awakens something in you and you can see how much emotional labor or sensuous labor or whatever went into the production of the artwork, that might be a criterion of truth for that. But for science, the criteria of truth is much more something like reproducibility. We need to be able to kind of see it from multiple perspectives and agree that it is the same thing. A really interesting turning point, just to go into a little bit of history on these kinds of qualities of validation or ascertainment of truth and value, actually goes back to Galileo, who made a distinction between something called primary and secondary qualities. Primary qualities are sort of the sensual things that escape kind of rigid verbal or mathematical definitions, things like saying this apple is red. And he advocated for the shifting towards a kind of paradigm of truth that emphasized the secondary qualities, or the things that you can, like, all, you know, if you and I are both looking at the same apple, we don't know that we're seeing the same red, but we can say that this apple is 80 grams because it's on a scale and the scale says 80 grams. And so we have this external validation, which is kind of the process of creating the sense of objectivity, of like an independent mathematical, mechanical referent, which, you know, it then becomes an interesting historical thing with the whole modern society, technological, you know, what we consider as real or valuable, privileging science over art, or getting rid of both, you know. Yeah. So I just wanted to speak to the question, because they are, I would say, they're equally dignified at least, but it's also not like they're both the same kind of objectivity. It's a different criteria of truth.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. Okay.
May I add? I would say I think today I find it like reassuring. I mean, in a sense, it's perhaps to an extent an illusion, but to have this point that people can come back to and say, okay, this is like objective truth, which is a very problematic term, but generally speaking, because we're living in a post-truth era where anything can be doubted. Even scientific findings can be doubted, like global warming. Like, many politicians don't believe that, and those are the ones who take decisions. So, or like in Slovakia, they're trying to pass the law which would say, if certain findings are against, how is it framed, like national feeling, we may just disregard them. And this would be a law in a constitution. So whatever the scientific finding is doesn't matter anymore, because it goes against a national feeling, so to speak. And there's no clue who decides what the national feeling is or not. So I think maybe we need, because the objectivity has been very, how to say, damaged. The concept of objectivity, I think, is very weak today. And I'm starting to think maybe it's nice to have a little bit of objectivity, at least as a referential concept, like to keep it alive, you know, bring objectivity back for the higher good.
Yeah, well, it's nice to hear that. But if there is no more discussion on these conceptual things, maybe we can get. I don't know, just briefly to invasive species. You were mentioning that invasive species are not all that bad. So can you give an examples what is the good in them? Where is the good in in or what we can do with them, or where is the light at the end of the tunnel?
I would say, I mean, the species that have been labeled invasive, they are definitely not. I mean, they're very impactful in the environment. They're changing profoundly something. So they're labeled not just because. No, I mean they're like really having a massive impact. That's why they're called invasive. This is because there's a whole kind of scale of non-native. They're just kind of assimilating. But the invasive ones are really, changing profoundly. Like the hogweed has literally invaded the Western Bohemia, for example. It has invaded massive parts of the U.S., etc., and still prevailing there. They have still a hard time to get rid of it. And they won't, probably. But so I think, there are other plants. There's kuzu, which is like an Asian plant, which is spreading wildly in Virginia, and it's covering literally all the forests with a kind of layer, etc. I think my idea would be to see these things in a different light, because by no means we can do anything about these things. I mean, we can try. I mean, we're definitely we're living. I mean, there are proofs of coexistence with these plants, but we are unable, we're incapable, not able, but we're incapable of eradicating them or changing anything about like this direction. This is the same with the salmons, probably. As you mentioned, that the salmons are absolutely, we can't do it. I mean, we have no means, and we are not masters of the planet as we think. So I think this, the idea of science also in the society is maybe overestimated in a way that science is very important, of course, but the objectivity of science as such. I mean, science. I mean, it sounds horrible, but I think this human condition that as humans as we are, we have so many different tools of dealing with reality. And we are maybe very unaware of, where we have omitted the sensing, we have omitted emotions, etc., which we try to be as effective as we can in our system right now, which drives us more towards the scientific approach. But I am wondering how valid in this, proportion it is regarding our human conditions, as emotional and as stupid we are. I mean, stupid.
Well, I would be a bad student of biology studying invasive species if I didn't reaffirm from my own objective position that it does feel very difficult to find a way of justifying en masse. Not that this, I know that you're being careful about how to approach the idea of invasive species, but it's very difficult to find anything good to say about them. And this isn't always because of a neglect of our sensory aspects. As I was showing, the natives of Finland and Norway, it's the sensory aspects that they report first. The river is rotting. That place has ancestral, practical, spiritual, so many kinds of values. They belong to that context. As people, they lived in these valleys and rivers and practiced these practices for generations and generations. And it's a similar kind of tragedy happening. Not just for humans, but for animals too. There was with West Coast salmon stocks plummeting, and coincidentally, pink salmon doing very well in the Pacific as well, because they're just fitted for the niche that's coming. There was a story of killer whales circulating around the kind of mouth of the river where they would have been waiting for their bite of the vital blood flow of the continent to come, but nothing was coming. So the males left, and the females and the children tried to stick around and wait for the salmon, and their songs were being recorded, and it just sounded awful, you know. So I think one of the things that we can say about sensory relationships to things or the natural world is that as we live in a post-truth era, everything belongs to a context. I don't know if I'm going to be able to say, but you guys are artists up here, not being sure if you're going to say exactly what you hope to communicate. So here I go. No, I'm not even sure if I can do that.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
well,
I do have one positive thing about invasive species.
Perfect.
I think they offer opportunity for us to look ourselves into the mirror, because they are like I don't say a byproduct, but they appearing in the places they do and develop dynamics they do mainly because we made this possible.
They are consequences of that's the definition.
Yes, but as long as we keep pointing at them being the problem, they just keep reappearing. So as long as the same structures are in place, the same problems will continue to occur. So I think this is one thing we can realize by them persistently being the way they are, until we actually take a look inside and maybe shift the ways we do things. So I think that's there is like yes, it's just a very unpleasant reminder. You guys screwed up. You guys screwed up. Every day we will remind you.
I think that was very nice ending of what we were trying to do today. And well, thank you very much for attendance. If you have any questions, that would be great. If not, you are welcome to come with us to NOD and have a beer there or water. And see you next time. Thank you very much.